Alright, today we're going to learn about the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula continues with our solving quadratics. So far you've done two methods with solving quadratics. Back in 9.2 you solved using your inverse operations. This is where you were solving kind of like you did back in Unit 2 for your equation. You just eventually, because you had a squared, you would have to take the square root. Then in 9.4 you solved using your factoring that you learned back in Unit 8. So you end up with two sets of parentheses. You would end up setting both of them equal to 0 and solving each one. However, both of these methods can only be used at certain times with certain types of quadratic equations. If your quadratic equation has both a quadratic and a linear term, then you are not able to solve using your inverse operations. Okay? If your quadratic equation is not factorable, so it's not possible for you to split your trinomial into two sets of parentheses and do your factoring, then obviously you can't solve by factoring. So you haven't seen any of those examples yet, but you're going to see those examples today. So in those cases, what do you do? How do you solve an equation that doesn't fit either of those methods? If you can't solve using your inverse operations and you can't solve by factoring, well, you've got to be able to solve it somehow. Every single type of quadratic equation has solutions to them. So what do? In this case, we can use what is called the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula can be used with all quadratic equations to solve. So that even means the equations you had back in 9.2 and back in 9.4, you could use the quadratic equations, or the quadratic formula, to solve those quadratic equations as well. A downfall of using the quadratic formula, although you can use it all the time with any equation, the downfall is it does take a little bit more time and effort. It is a little bit harder than the other two. So that makes it to where it's not necessarily favorable to just always use that one. Some people, though, get to it and they like it, and that's the one they use all the time, and that's fine. But sometimes that becomes a downfall, and that's why we revert back to what we did in 9.2 or what we did in 9.4 with our factoring. So remember that when we're solving a quadratic equation and you're finding your solution, you're solving for x or whatever your variable might be. Remember, you are also finding what are called the roots or the zeros or the x-intercepts. So when you're solving your quadratic equation, you're getting some solutions here. You're just getting the roots, you're getting the zeros, you're finding your x-intercepts. If I were to graph the equation, where does it cross the x-axis is what we're really looking for. Alright, for the quadratic formula, the first thing is you need to know what it is. You need to get this memorized. In a moment, you're going to listen to a song over and over and over on replay until you end up getting it memorized. Okay, it is very important. The quadratic formula is x equals, or whatever your variable is we're solving for. So if your equation had a t, you'd say t equals, or if it was k, it'd be k equals. The rest of it, though, is the same no matter what. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by, from negative b all the way down to that c, all divided by 2 times a. Okay, a in both places, b in both places, and c are numbers that you're going to get from your quadratic equation that they gave you. Okay, so like I said, this will end up getting memorized. We'll see a couple of examples, and then you're going to pause and you're going to go and you're going to watch a video on repeat until you have it memorized. Okay, it's very important that you get this formula memorized. Alright, in order to use the quadratic formula, your equation must be in standard form, which, if we need reminded, is ax squared plus bx plus c, and it's supposed to equal 0. Okay, where a, b, and c here are the numbers that are your a's, b's, and c's in your quadratic formula. Okay, so ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the big thing is you have to have it equaling 0, and then remember, from largest exponent to smallest down till you get to the constant. If you are not already in this form, you must convert it to that form. So we're going to see a lot of examples where you're going to have to do some moving. It's not going to be set equal to 0, so you're going to have to subtract or add or whatever to get stuff over to the other side. Once you have your equation in standard form, the next step would be identifying your a, b, and c values. A is the coefficient that's in front of your quadratic term. So a is the number that's right here in front of x squared. Okay? A, b, and c are just the number parts. You are not attaching x squared to it. A is just whatever number is in front of x squared. B is the value or the number in front of your linear term. So whatever number is right here in front of the x. It's just the number, not x. And C is your constant, so whatever number you have here at the end. Okay? Keeping in mind you must pay attention to your signs for all three of these. So if I had like a minus something, maybe I'd like -1, then my C term is -1. Okay, so pay attention to those. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get into an example here so you can see what this looks like. So we're going to find our solutions. Remember, that means we're finding the roots, we're finding the zeros, we're finding the x-intercepts. So your step number 1 is to convert it to standard form if need be. So the big thing, standard form, remember, we have to be equal 0. So if I come back and look, I do not have equals 0, so I'm going to need to move this 4x. And since it's positive, I'm going to move it by subtracting 4x. And now remember, everything I do here, I've got to do it to the other side. So there's two things you need to look for. Number 1 is there a like term you are going to be able to combine it with? If so, you would do that. In our case, we do not have a like term. I have x squareds, but I don't have any x's. So when that happens, then you need to know where are you supposed to put this x term. Remember, x is supposed to be between x squared and between your constant. It's supposed to be in the middle. So when I subtract 4x, I'm going to subtract it in the middle. It's like I have a 0 here. I'm going to bring it down and subtract that 4x. So to get into standard form, I keep my x squared. Now I have minus 4x, keep my -8, and now I have 4x minus 4x gives me my equals 0. And I want to check to make sure I'm in standard form. I have my x squared, then my x, then my constant equals 0. So I am good. Now we need to identify a, b, and c. Remember, those are your numbers. A is the number in front of x squared. It's in front of your quadratic, so the number that's here. Remember your imaginary number. If you don't have anything, but you have an x squared term, that means your imaginary number is 1. B is the number in front of your x, or in front of your linear term. I have this -4. Since it's a -4, I'm going to put b as -4. And then c is your constant, which if you look, same thing here, I have a minus sign, so my c is -8. Alright, so now I have my a, b, and c values. So now I need to plug them into my formula correctly. So I have your formula kind of set up with some blanks that we need to go and fill some things in. So I have x equals, it's negative, and then I'm going to plug in my b value. So there's a negative outside here that's from the formula, this negative that's up here. In this parenthesis, I'm going to plug in the b value, which for me is -4. So I'm going to plug in a -4. Then I have a plus or minus sign, and then a long square root. The first thing under there is the b value that's going to get squared. So I'm going to take my b value again as -4, and then I'm going to square it. And then in the formula, it's -4, and then it's times a and times c. So I'm going to take a, which is 1, so I'm going to have -4, and then times 1, and then times c, which is -8. That fills in my whole numerator, and I'm going to go to the denominator, and it's 2 times a. So remember, a was 1, so I have 2 times 1. So I already have a negative. Plug in your b, plus or minus the square root, b, and then it's going to get squared, -4 times the a, and then times c, and then all divided by 2 times a. Alright, now we're going to get into a lot of math and a lot of simplifying. So, number 1, you need to get Desmos pulled up so that you can do some simplifying or grab a calculator. Number 2, because there are definitely lots of places where you can make some errors, I need you to actually do the work in your calculator. And if you do not get the right answer, if you do not get what I have, I need you to let me know. Call your teacher over so that we can figure out where your mistake is. Okay? So, there are 3 things we're going to do in the next step. We're going to simplify that -b. So I'm going to come back here. I have a negative, -4. So 2 negatives turn into a positive. So really that number out front is just +4. Next, you're going to simplify the b squared minus 4ac. That's everything under the square root, not the square root itself. So in your calculator, you're going to do parentheses, -4, close your parentheses, squared, -4 times 1 times -8. You are not typing in the square root. You must put this -4 in parentheses before you square it. Okay, so I need you to do that on your own. Pause the video right here, do that in your calculator, see what you get. You are supposed to get 48. If you get anything other than 48, I need you to call your teacher over so we can look through to see what you did wrong. And then the last thing we're going to simplify is the 2a, which is your denominator. So we're going to simplify down here. 2 times 1 gives you 2. Alright, now that we have done that, we get into a little bit easier simplifying stuff. This is the hardest number to have to deal with, okay? So make sure you get this number correct. Now we're going to take the square root. So now that we have this number, we're going to take the square root of it. So 4 is going to stay 4. We're not doing anything with that. And your denominator is going to stay 2. We're not going to do anything with that. We're going to take the square root of 48. Now, two things could happen. You could end up with a nice whole number when you take the square root. Maybe your answer is 7. Awesome. Or, in this case, you take the square root and you get long decimals. When that happens, you are going to round to the hundredths place. Remember that hundredth is 2 decimals. And round it correctly, okay? So when you take the square root of 48 and we round correctly, we should get 6.93. Okay? Next step. Now we're going to split this into our two fractions. Remember, your plus or minus sign is called a plus or minus because one time you are going to add and one time you're going to subtract. So I'm going to take 4 plus 6.93, all divided by 2, is the first one. 4 plus 6.93, all divided by 2. And then the next time, since this time I did plus, the next time I'm going to do 4 minus 6.93. So now I'm going to do 4 minus 6.93, all divided by 2. Okay, so my two fractions should be exactly the same except one time I have a plus and one time I have a minus. Alright, now we're going to do some simplifying of our numerator. So we're going to take this top, 4 plus 6.93. We're going to add those together. I'm going to leave my dividing by 2 for now, so I have 10.93. I'm going to divide by 2. Leave it like that for now. And then same thing in the other one, except I'm going to do my subtraction. So 4 minus 6.93. I get negative 2.93, all divided by 2. Same thing in all of these places. Remember, if you don't get the right numbers, you're going to do it in your calculator. If you don't get these numbers in your calculator or in your head, make sure you talk with your teacher so we can figure out your issue. Now we're going to just do the division. I'm going to take 10.93 and I'm going to divide by 2. Remember, back up here, same thing. If we have to round, remember we always want to round to hundredths place. So if you get more than 2 decimals in your answers, make sure you do round them and then round them correctly. So when I do this dividing, 10.93 divided by 2, I get 5.47 when I round correctly. And then same thing with my other one, except now it's negative 2.93 divided by 2. And then round to nearest hundredths correctly, I get negative 1.47. So here are my two answers. I am saying that my roots, my zeros, my solutions, or my x-intercepts are supposed to be 5.47 and negative 1.47. So you're going to go ahead and pause the video and you're going to go on to the graphing Desmos. You're going to check your answers on Desmos by typing the original equation into Desmos. So the original, the one it gave you back up here, not this one that you converted. Because if you made a mistake from here to your conversion, all of this work might be right, but you have wrong in your conversion and you're not going to know. So you're going to type the original equation into Desmos. X squared minus 8 equals 4x. So go ahead and find your graphing Desmos, get that typed in, and then look at your x-intercepts. They are supposed to be these two numbers. If something is wrong and they're not the same, then go ahead and talk to your teacher. Alright, at this point, you're going to continue on the back side. I need to make a new video, so I'm going to stop my video here and you're going to open up the new one.